This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello there and welcome to episode 68 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today I'm giving you an episode full of solo travel tips. Well, in fact, it's full of solo travel stories and we're going to extract some tips from it. And my final guest today is actually a psychologist who has some really interesting, like from a psychological perspective, ways to prepare yourself to travel solo. But we'll get to that. First up, I don't know if you have had many chances to travel solo. I don't get to do it too often. But I always really enjoy it. And I understand that a lot of people are reluctant to do it. And so I'm hoping that some of these stories and tips will help you take the plunge at some stage. And it should be said that 20 years ago, I was terrified of the idea of traveling solo, and I really didn't think I ever would be able to. And now it's not something that bothers me at all. So things can change over time. So let's get straight into it. My first guest today is Becky Livingston, and she has a hilarious story about one of the particular benefits of travelling solo, which I'm sure you're going to enjoy.
I'm on a flight, actually, from my house sit down in Berkeley, and I'm on the plane. I'm getting on the plane in San Francisco and going up to Seattle. And I had this thing about trying to be the last one that would ever go on to board the plane. Okay. I kind of like doing that like it was no big deal, right? And this is a classic example of only because I was on my own. So I get on the plane, everybody's sitting down, and I'm one of the middle seats, which is often what happens when when you're on your own, right? And so this guy is on the aisle seat, and I have to go, oh, excuse me, and he turns to look at me, and I swear to God, it was Johnny Depp.
No way.
No, but it wasn't.
It wasn't. Oh, God. It looked like him. Okay.
In my brain, I was like, it can't be Johnny Depp because he would be in first class, or he would be on a private jet.
Yes.
And he was
okay, so it's Johnny Depp's double.
He's Johnny Depp's doppelganger. And it was anyway. So he stands up. He's got this beautiful face. He's got this little goatee. And he's got his hair tied back in a ponytail. He's got this gorgeous, like, soft pink sweater. And I'm just there going, I can feel my heart just racing. I'm thinking, oh, yeah, this is great, right? So anyway, and I've got my backpack on, which was my small backpack, which was my hand luggage. And he said to me, oh, would you like some help with that? And I'm like, oh, no, it's okay. And as I'm doing that, I'm thinking, yeah, why didn't I just say, oh, would you? That would be so nice. Let's do. Anyway, and then I get in and I sit down. It's all I can do. My heart's like racing. And then he starts to talk to me, and I'm thinking to myself, and he's got an earring and everything. And I'm just like, oh, I can't believe this. So he said to me, so where are you going? And where do you live? And I said, well, actually, I don't live anywhere right now because I'm house sitting. Oh, he said, that's fantastic. He said, home is wherever you are and whoever you're with. And I thought, oh, wow. So he sounds like this really cool guy.
Yeah, he sounds really cool.
Gorgeous. Anyway, it's just, I can't even tell you. I think I just started to giggle like a schoolgirl, Anyway, but to just sort of make the point, that would not have happened if I had been with somebody else.
That's so true. That is a classic solo travel moment.
It was a classic solo travel, and I'm so glad it happened.
I love it.
Because it just sort of made my day, right? And I think that that's one of the most wonderful things about being alone, is that you do have these chance encounters. And I think that often you don't hold back.
Yes.
I think when you're with somebody else, it's very easy to, I think two ways. I think when you're with somebody else, you don't tend to reach out. You don't tend to ask. You sort of go, oh, we'll figure this out on our own. But I think likewise, when somebody sees somebody traveling alone, it resonates. Everybody resonates with alone.
Yes.
And I think people sort of look at you, go, oh, are you all right? Or do you need a hand? Or kind of help you. And I think I did that to people too, because I was alone. So I think it works both ways, being the person who's alone and somebody who is seeing somebody who is alone. And I think that's the most wonderful thing about it. And I think all kinds of experiences happened for me that wouldn't have happened had I been with somebody else. And there were many, many times I thought to myself, I'm so glad that I'm on my own, because I don't think this particular interaction would have happened had I been with somebody else.
I've had some interesting encounters with people I've met on flights, but never as one as fun and enjoyable as Becky's experience with this Johnny Depp lookalike. But I think that she's so right that it's one of the wonderful benefits of travelling on your own is that people do tend to talk to you more and offer to help more, and you're just more approachable. And plus, you're more likely to speak with someone else and kind of just be yourself, because no one knows you. You're completely independent and can be, just natural and just you. So I think that's a wonderful part of solo travel. It reminds me, actually, of a lovely lady I met last year, it was, on a flight to Sydney. And shout out to Lorraine, hello, because I know she listens to the podcast now because we met on the plane. And sometimes I'm wary about speaking to people who you're sitting next to on the plane because, like, especially at the beginning of a big trip, what if you get chatting to them and then they're the people who never stop talking, but you want to stop talking and read your book or something? It can be awkward. But I wished in retrospect, I had started chatting to Lorraine earlier because it was relatively close to Sydney before I struck up a conversation. And we had so much in common. We were both great travellers, and we talked for the rest of the flight, and it was wonderful. So, hi, Lorraine. And it reminded me that I should be more open to these kinds of interesting meetings, but not just in a plane, but wherever you are when you're travelling solo. It's a great way to get chatting to some really cool people. Now, my next guest today is Ian of the Barefoot Backpacker. He's on the Thoughtful Travel podcast for the first time this episode, and he's done lots of really interesting solo travel. And some of the reasons that he gives for doing so are just wonderful. And it might help you to think about how you could really enjoy solo travel as well if you share some of Ian's ideas.
Most of the travel I do is solo. This is for a number of reasons. I have a big fear of commitment.
Aha.
And what that effectively boils down to is, it happened in Southeast Asia. I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning going, I don't know which country I'm going to be in tonight. I've got a choice of 3.
Oh, cool.
And that whole flexibility of not, I book things at the last minute anyway. Mm-hmm. And that whole flexibility of being able to go, I don't fancy that. I fancy this instead, and just going.
Mm-hmm. You can only do that on your own.
Absolutely. Plus there's the whole, I'm not very good at time management. So if I want to be late for a bus, then it's on my head, not on anybody else's. I don't want to have to wait for anyone else. I don't want anyone else to have to wait for me. It means that I have interesting tastes when it comes to travel. I have strange, I don't do museums unless they're really hyper local. But what I do is walk down the street and then go, ooh, there's some street art down that alleyway, disappear down the alleyway for 5 minutes.
Right.
So it's much easier to do that when you're on your own, because then you don't get people going, where the hell are you?
Yes, exactly.
So, yes.
No, that sounds some very sensible reasons for travelling solo. I love to travel solo, although I often travel with my 7-year-old, but that's almost the same. I mean,
yes.
I'm still the boss as far as he's concerned, so I can choose what and where.
You tell, basically. If you want to disappear down an alleyway to take pictures of street art, he's coming with you.
Exactly, yes, and he doesn't really complain, so yeah, exactly. But yeah, solo travel, that freedom of being able to choose exactly, when, what, where, how, all by yourself. Yes. It's such a beautiful feeling.
It is, and it's what I like doing. And as I say, because I have this kind of fear of commitment, I don't like having to book things in advance, but most of my friends do.
Right.
Which means that if I want to go on holiday with them, I would have to book about maybe 2-3 months in advance and go, all right, this is what we're doing on this date, this is what we're doing on that day. I can't do that.
No, it's not as fun.
I've booked flights on the day before now.
Oh, have you really? That's impressive. I'm
Oh yeah,
impressed.
mainly when I'm going home, interestingly. But yes,
Oh dear. So I mean, I agree. There's so many bonuses of solo travel, but are there any downsides for you?
um, when I was in West Africa, I really hate travel bloggers that say things like that. When I was in,
Yeah, but you have to really.
I don't know, it makes me sound really pretentious. In West Africa, I had 5 weeks of traveling solo around, and it's not a place that's got many other travelers in it. So for a large period of time, I was on my own,
Right.
and it kind of got a bit lonely after a while.
Sure. Yeah.
Because there was nobody else to talk to in the hostels and things like that.
Yeah, because that's often the beauty of solo travel is that you do get to meet and chat to lots of other travellers. Because if you're on your own, it's easy to kind of get to know people. So I can see that if those people don't exist, then you can spend days not really having a proper conversation. That does get a bit hard.
I mean, I don't often talk to other travellers in hostels, but the fact is that I can if I wanted to. So the option's there. But when you're in guest houses and you're the only person in the guest house, not just the only foreigner, but the only person in the guest house, because you're staying somewhere slightly off the beaten track, slightly out of season, in a country that people don't go to anyway, then it kind of gets very lonely. Especially when it's okay for a couple of nights, but when it's like a couple of weeks, then it's a bit weird. And that's one of the main disadvantages. Another one is cost, but not for the reason you'd think.
Oh,
I mean,
do tell.
I stay in backpacker hostels quite a lot, so solo travel is no more expensive. You don't get the single. There's no such thing as a single.
No, it's just by person anyway. Yeah.
Yes. Food, that's fairly simple as well, because if you either go to a cafe or get street food or just buy what you need to cook with, and there's nothing. If you're in a hostel for 3 days, you just buy a load of stuff, and then you've got 3 days worth of food. Yeah, that's not a problem. It's more when you're getting off, because places I like to go off, quite a lot of them are off the beaten track. If there's no public transport there, then you have to sort of start hiring taxis. And the way that a lot of the taxis will work is that they have a fixed price, or at least a fixed range of prices. So if you can find other people going to the same place, it works out quite cheap. But if you're the only person that wanted to go to this obscure ruin 2 hours down the road, then it's expensive.
Now, I think that Ian's point about getting lonely on a solo trip is really interesting. So he travels solo a lot, but actually being lonely is something that's been very, very rare. And really, it sounds like he's only really experienced that during a month traveling solo in West Africa, because there literally were pretty much no other people around to get to know or talk to. And I know it's something that people fear when they travel solos. They might be lonely, but I think it's very unlikely that you actually will be. Sometimes as a solo traveller, you have the most people around you and you make all kinds of new connections and friends, and you're really very far from lonely. So that's something that's good to think about. And I love that one of his main reasons for travelling solo is just he doesn't want to have to compromise with others about decisions and time management and when to go and what to do. And I completely understand that, because that for me is one of the best parts of solo travel, is that all the decisions are up to me and I can go where I want, when I want, and I don't have to explain myself to anyone. I love that part of solo travel. Okay, now my final guest today is Kristen Truempy. She's also a first-time guest on the Thoughtful Travel podcast today, and she is also the host of the Positive Psychology podcast. So it's really interesting for me that I've stumbled across her podcast in iTunes and was very excited because she had some episodes about travel and sort of the positive psychology and the benefits of travel. So I was very keen to talk to her, and she will feature in some more episodes in the future as well. But for this episode on solo travel, I asked her about it and kind of some parts of the psychology of it, I guess. And she came up with 3 really interesting ways that make a successful solo trip, or 3 mindsets and 3 things you can do to help yourself be a successful solo traveller, I guess. So these are kind of things that you can think about ahead of time as well that will ensure your success when you travel on your own, and that you really, really love it.
think there are certain things you can do to prepare for it. So I think that if you can develop like a basic level of confidence. Now, I'm not saying these are things that you need to have before you travel. I think you can do without it, but it just makes travel easier, right? So, for example, when I was a kid, I took judo classes for a couple of years, and although obviously when you're a grown woman and a grown man would actually attack you, it would be hard to fend him off. But at least you have a little bit of a chance.
Yes.
Whereas you probably don't really if you've never engaged in anything like that at all, right? So for me, I find that sports is actually a good way to gain confidence. And I think sports are so underrated in a weird way because everybody thinks about them as a way to exercise, to lose weight and that kind of thing. But I think for me, like I've played soccer large chunks of my life, not all my life, but for large chunks of my life, and I've played it, and I still play it with guys, and they are fair, they're fair, but they do not, play less well just because there's a woman or two women,
so it's pretty physical
on the pitch. Yes, it's physical.
Yeah,
and with football, I don't know, what do you say in Australia? Soccer or football?
We say soccer.
You say soccer.
Yes,
all right.
Because
so
we have Australian
soccer,
rules football, so that's football, and soccer is football is soccer. Yep.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So soccer. The thing is, you cannot play it for years and not, have like, even if it's just minor injuries or somebody like you will have the ball full force fly at your head at some point.
Yes.
And that just happens. That's just a normal part of the process.
Sure.
Similarly, I talked about running, right? So if you run, if you're able to do a little bit of endurance running, what it does is that it gives you a kind of confidence that just, it comes very naturally. It's not something you have to stand in front of the mirror and be like, I am strong. No, because you actually know that you have a certain strength or a certain dexterity or certain
you feel it, you physically feel it. So
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that doing sports and varied forms of exercise are actually a great way. And I want to say, people don't see me, but I'm overweight. Okay, I'm overweight. I can really, it's not like, oh, this is the easiest thing. I'm not like one of these yoga girls that you imagine.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's important because people are otherwise would just be like, well, easy for her to say. No.
Yes, she's a super athlete. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not, but I've been doing all of these things all of my life. And I feel that they help with a certain confidence because you have a certain faith in that your body can withstand certain things. And it's not necessarily assault. It's also like just being stranded in a place or just having to walk maybe longer than you expected to walk. So a certain physical preparedness, I think, does help. It's not a condition. If that's not you and you're leaving next Monday, don't worry. But I do think if you think about traveling, one of the ways you could do that is to pick a sport or two and get good at it. That's
excellent advice. I've never thought about it, but it makes perfect sense.
Then, so you talked about people for solo travel, so the specific of solo travel, and I think if you don't like yourself, solo travel is going to be hard.
Yes.
Now, I can't say that I always like myself the same way, right? So obviously, when you're a teenager and all of these things are I think they're a little bit harder, but they stay hard if we don't come across ways to deepen our relationship with ourselves. Now, travel itself can be a good way to do that, but it's a bit of a circular argument. So if you don't like yourself, well, it doesn't help you because you're probably not going to travel by yourself, or if you're going to, it's not going to be great.
Yes.
So I think the ability to develop self-compassion is super helpful.
Yes.
Self-compassion is broken up into self-kindness. So this idea that you don't talk to yourself in a way that you would never speak to other people. So often we are very harsh with ourselves. We will say, like, why did you do that? That's so stupid. Only people who have completely, that
we're horrible to ourselves. We would never say that to someone we love. Yeah.
And I mean, hopefully we wouldn't say it to somebody we love. If you do, maybe don't take that as a measurement. But
true. Well, we certainly wouldn't say it to a stranger.
Yes. Whoever you treat the best, get into the habit of using that voice towards yourself. So that's self-kindness. Then there's common humanity, and that's again reinforced through travel, seeing that everybody is going through the same kind of fears and struggles. And then the third aspect of self-compassion is mindfulness. So this idea to not always have the need to run away from yourself, but actually be there. And even if you have unpleasant thoughts, to be like, yes, I have unpleasant thoughts now. How do they feel? Where do I feel it in my body? And that's that. So self-compassion. And then a third one that I really wanted to mention is if you have a mind where it's actually interesting to live in, it's way more interesting to be with yourself, because people have to realize that when you travel, you are in a lot of boring situations.
Yes.
You are waiting for a plane, you are waiting for a bus, and then you think, oh, I had to wait 5 hours, and then they tell you, guess what, it's late, or it's not coming today, or you just missed it, and then suddenly you have to wait 17 hours, or you're on a trip where you have to be in a bus for 17 hours. And if you are the kind of person who's interested in the world, chances are that whatever is going on in your head is somewhat interesting, right? Because if we feed ourselves with interesting information, if we hang out with people who are interesting and rewarding to be with, then being by yourself is not that bad, because even if you have no idea, you can at least reminisce about those things. But if we feed ourselves with garbage all day long, then garbage is what's going to come out in these moments when you're by yourself.
Makes sense, yes. That's fascinating, because I guess, without meaning to sound conceited, I must have a mind that is interesting to live in, as you put it. Because, for example, I can't think of anything more wonderful than, I've been on the Trans-Siberian across Russia, but I, stopped and started a few times. My dream is to go non-stop. It takes a week to travel across. But I just think sitting there and watching Russia go by on my own, that's like a heavenly goal for me to be able to do that. So I think I've got that part under control. But it makes a lot of sense, because I think that's, where some people think, oh, I couldn't imagine that. What would you do all that time? That's where they maybe, can't quite grasp how they could cope. So I guess to summarise Kristen's thinking there, that if you have confidence, if you have self-compassion, and if you're able to sit with yourself and your thoughts without getting bored, then those three things will stand you in really good stead for enjoying solo travel. I thought it was such a great way and really interesting way to look at it. So I hope that helps you out, and that as a whole, our stories and chats today will help you find solo travel something that you really want to try, or if you've been convinced before, then something that you want to do again soon. So thank you very much for listening to episode 68, all on solo travel tips. Let me give you some information on where you can find out more about our delightful guests today. So to start off, we chatted with Becky Livingston, and you can find her Facebook community Joyful Morning at Joyful Morning 101 on Facebook. If you see the show notes, you will find a link there. And her website is belivingrock.com. Now, Ian is also known as the Barefoot Backpacker, and you can find his blog at barefoot-backpacker.com. Lots of great stories there. And he's on Instagram where he is barefoot_backpacker. And finally, I would highly recommend looking up Kristen's The Positive Psychology podcast. It's got some interesting episodes for people in many situations. And if you look for a couple of the episodes about travel specifically, were really, really interesting. So you can just search for the Positive Psychology podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts, or go to strengthsphoenix.com/listen. She also has an audiobook called Brainwash, Retrain Your Brain in 21 Days, which looks really interesting. And there's a link to that in the show notes. And if you want to hear some more about solo travel, a while back in episode 58, I chatted with some people about solo travel freedom. Some really great stories there. So that would be at notaballerina.com/58. So hop over to our Facebook group, Thoughtful Travellers, and tell me what you think about solo travel. Do you love it? Are you sold? Do you like doing it occasionally? Or are you terrified of it? Or anything else in between? You can search for Thoughtful Travellers on Facebook and just click to ask to join. You just have to answer one simple question, which is about what was one of your favourite trips. And one word answer is fine. It's just to weed out any real spammers who are trying to join the group. You can also tweet me at Amanda Kendall and use the hashtag ThoughtfulTravelPod. And all of this stuff will be in the show notes. And for this episode, the show notes will be at notaballerina.com/68. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.